Be cool, every teacher, every school.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Be Cool. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner of the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves Cool. You can learn more about us on the website, which is cool.us. I'll put that up there. That's CEWL.us. Welcome back. It's been a little while since we've had some live streams, and we had a couple of wonderful mindfulness retreats with educators from South Carolina in June. And then last week we had a great event, not only our summer leadership event, but our trauma-informed education workshop with Rona Neely and Karen Beeman. And I want to thank both of them and for everyone who showed up to that event. It was a really, really nice time, and we learned a lot. I'm really excited tonight. My partner, she recommended this book called The Four Pivots, and she kept recommending it over and over again because she said, I really think you're going to resonate with a lot of what he said. And I'm just one of those people, you recommend something to me and it takes a little while, and then I finally will check it out. And I'm so glad I did. It's an incredible book. The author is the Jerome T. Murphy Professor of Practice at Harvard Graduate School of Education. His groundbreaking work on trauma, healing, and the empowerment of African-American youth has earned him a reputation as an innovator, provocateur, and thought leader in the field of education. His research has been instrumental in reshaping the discourse surrounding youth development. His introduction of the concept of healing-centered engagement in 2018 has revolutionized the field, providing an asset-based approach to addressing youth trauma and fostering resilience. His work has been cited in the New York Times, and he is a highly sought-after speaker on topics ranging from civic engagement and youth activism to the transformative power of healing. His contributions extend beyond his academic work. He's a seasoned nonprofit leader, serving as the co-founder and chief executive officer of Flourish Agenda Incorporated, a pioneer research lab and consulting firm dedicated to unlocking the power of healing and empowering youth of color, as well as their adult allies, to drive transformative change in their schools and communities. In addition, he's written numerous books, including The Four Pivots, but also Hope and Healing in Urban Education, How Urban Activists and Teachers Are Reclaiming Matters of the Heart, Black Youth Rising, Activism and Radical Healing in Urban America, Black in School, Afrocentric Reform, Urban Youth and the Promise of Hip Hop Culture, as well as co-edited the influential volume Beyond Resistance, Youth Activism and Community Change, New Democratic Possibilities for Practice and Policy for America's Youth. He resides in Boston, between Boston, Massachusetts and Oakland, California, and continues to drive transformative change in education. His relentless dedication to empowering marginalized youth and creating inclusive spaces for healing and growth is truly inspiring. To learn more about his impactful work, you can visit his website, ShawnGinright.com. So without further ado, let's bring on Dr. Shawn Ginright. How are you doing tonight, Shawn?
Hey, Todd. How you doing? Glad to be here.
First of all, is there anything that I did not mention in your bio that you'd like to share with our viewers tonight?
No, I mean, that's it. I mean, I have two wonderful adult kids. I am empty nest-ish because they've left and kind of come back, but that's about it. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
We talked a little bit before you came on, but a really cool local connection that I read about in The Four Pivots was your family, some of your family being from the Marion, South Carolina area, which is only about 45 minutes from where I am. Talk a little bit about that, about your connection to South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fascinating story, man. My father and his father, which is my grandfather, of course, shared stories with me about how much land the Ginrights owned in Marion, South Carolina. They used to have sheep and goats and all kinds of things. And my grandfather remembers actually being run off that land as a child because all of his cousins and uncles owned that land. And so they were run off the land, and apparently it was taken or stolen or something. But I've been fascinated about actually getting the facts of and the more detailed information about that story and that land. So
Yeah.
fascinating connection. I've never been there, but one day I hope to be able to go and actually we have a map of the land. Actually, my grandfather kind of mapped it out before he passed years ago.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned the PD River, which I've been fishing on a few times. So really cool local connection, and I'm so glad we were able to connect, and you were willing to come on and share with us, because there were so many things in your book, The Four Pivots, that I felt I just kept going, wow, like wow, just so many ideas and concepts. And I wanted to start off with this idea early in the book, where you write about how changing the things that are broken in our society requires collective healing, and that the most important aspect of social change isn't problem analysis, power building, narrative change, or coalition building, but healing. So for those of us in education, what does healing look like, and where do we begin with that?
Well, in education, we've been so focused on various domains of what we believe matters in educational change. Curricular transformation through SEL, school reform movements, understanding school funding formulas, all of that is important, but it also misses an important ingredient, and that is, who are we? Who are the human beings that actually run and show up and are present in schools?
Right.
And oftentimes that question, who are the teachers, who are leaders, who are the adults in those spaces? It's like the assumption is, if you create the systems and policies and procedures, that the natural outcome is greater academic achievement. And we know that's actually not the case, right? Um, so for what this means for education is that oftentimes we believe that our external rewards, our degrees, our professional development and training, our certificates are enough to actually be transformative for young people. But that's not the case. The case is that we're all human, that we all are broken, we're broken, and we try desperately to hide our wounds.
Mm,
And in doing that, sometimes we reproduce the very policies and externalities in schools that we're trying to eliminate. And so in the book, what I call for in terms of our movements is not to abandon what we know works in terms of social change, in terms of movement building, not to abandon that, but to also pay attention to those aspects of our lives, individually and collectively, that are broken.
yeah.
And it is only when we can heal that brokenness that gives us the power to see and do something differently. And so I call attention to that, because the internal world, which are our lives, our wounds, our hopes, our dreams, are oftentimes not about social change and social justice.
Right. I love the metaphor you've used, and I used it too, how we're almost like playing a game of whack-a-mole with the symptoms. I feel like you really powerfully talk about how sometimes we get so focused on shallow solutions, and we're not really getting to the core root of the problem. And I see this in education advocacy a lot. And I think it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be an either or, but it feels like sometimes we're so focused on those externalities, and we're not taking a look at what's sort of causing these things to continue on decade after decade after decade of the same kind of problems. It's just maybe in a different form, whether it's the working conditions for teachers, or the overemphasis on standardized testing. It's like whether, no matter the administration, no matter who the admins are, it's like, seems like these same problems keep popping up. How do we collectively get to the root causes? What do you see, first of all, as some of the root causes of
Yeah.
problems in our system of education, and how do we get to that root?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's a number of roots. I mean, I think that there are a number of roots. So I think first is that we haven't had an opportunity to humanize ourselves in systems. And what do I mean by humanize? What I mean by humanize is to create the conditions that allows for human flourishing in these systems. That our systems weren't built for that. And I liken it to, and I don't talk about this in the book, but I think this is a good opportunity to talk about that when we create systems that are geared for mass production and outcome driven standards, which is what we have now, then we think that it's just putting together all the right inputs and we will get all the right outputs. If we have the right curriculum, the right teacher training, the right classroom, discipline, whatever those inputs are, it's supposed to equal better outcomes. We haven't seen that for the most part. And that's because I think we focus so much on the outcomes, but not enough on the conditions that produce those outcomes. And I like to use the metaphor of a gardener. Todd, I don't know if you have a garden. I have a garden, right? But if you had a gardener, what a gardener does, and if you think about a garden in a greenhouse, right, grow tomatoes and flowers. When you plant those flowers and those tomatoes in a greenhouse, what a gardener does is get very curious, not on the outcomes, but the conditions. They pay attention to the soil, the moisture of the soil, the amount of water, the amount of sunlight it gets, because they understand, a gardener understands, if the conditions are optimal, the outcomes are inevitable.
Right.
I said again, if the conditions are optimal, then the outcomes are inevitable. But I don't think we do that enough in schools, right? And so we are, and so your question is, what is the root cause? So one of the root causes is our overemphasis on outcomes, or our overemphasis on the process, and not as much on those conditions. And those conditions also involve the adults in those environments. One of the greatest things that's lacking in our public schools are what are the social systems, what are the systems of support to facilitate, nurture, and enhance the well-being of the teaching workforce.
Right.
Right. Teachers have to take a sick day, right? They have to be broken in order to go back to work and be effective, right? In other words, that the way our systems are created, it doesn't focus, or we don't have a way of really centering what it means to be human in these systems. So I think there's, I think I've kind of answered your question in two ways. One, overly focused on sort of outcomes and not as much on conditions. And then second, like, how do we actually humanize these systems, humanize schools, humanize these systems in ways that actually place human beings at the center? Yeah,
I created a docuseries called Rehumanizing School. I'm going to give myself a shameless plug here.
Hey.
Series. It's called Rehumanizing School. People can find it on the Cool website. It's a 4-part docuseries about schools in rural Virginia that are doing exactly what you're talking about, which is rehumanizing the profession, and then creating a humanized system for not only the teachers but the students. But I see what you're talking about. We talked about this last week in our trauma informed workshop about teachers going in and like, a lot of times PD on trauma is about, okay, how can I take this and help my students? And we just bypass the idea that the adults in the building need to heal first. If you want to have healed students, you need to have healed educators modeling for them regulation, emotional regulation, modeling for them having a healthy work-life balance, modeling for them how to manage stress, and I think what we do, like you hit the nail on the head, is we're so focused on the outcomes, and we're not focused on really what underlies the dysfunction that we see. When we don't have those outcomes, we tend to judge the students, say, well, this is just a bad group of students. But we wouldn't do that using your garden metaphor. We wouldn't say, well, that was a bad group of tomato plants. We would say, what happened in the process of growing those tomatoes that went wrong? because it's that process. Is it the soil? Is it not enough sunlight, not enough water? What was it? Instead of blaming the tomatoes, they were just bad tomatoes. So I think that was really brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, for years, man, I'm not just a professor, but I've, practiced, right? And we have this, I created a camp, me and my wife created a camp called Camp Akili years ago. It's still around. We're trying to scale it to other cities now, where we're working with teenage young people, African-American youth primarily, really trying to create those conditions in that container. What does it look like to create, you bring 75 young people from Philadelphia. We're in Philadelphia this year, Oakland, 75 young people who've all experienced some form of trauma. But we're not actually doing therapy. What we're trying to do is pay attention to the conditions, really building strong relationships with the adults, among themselves, and with those young people, how to create safety so young people feel safe sharing, creating a sense of joy and happiness and play. We saturate that week with the conditions that we believe make a difference. What is the result? The result is young people come out with community, connected. Young people come out saying things like, I've never told anybody this, but I've been holding it. And now that I've said it and I got it out, I feel so much lighter. And so there's ways that we could address trauma collectively that doesn't require sort of the myopic sort of therapeutic medical model that says that you have to sort of, go to a therapist. And I know some of your listeners are therapists and social workers. I'm not suggesting that we not have social workers and therapists. But what I am suggesting is that the depth and breadth of exposure to trauma in our country, we need the bandwidth to respond to that is like trying to blow a golf ball through a water hose, right? We need to expand access to behavioral and mental health in ways that we haven't imagined before. And that means not just training more therapists, not just training more social workers, but completely shifting how we think about delivery of behavioral and mental health. And so this camp is an opportunity for us to play and experiment with ways to saturate young people with tools about how they can be well collectively, but then also how they actually move in the world. And that requires both the healing of the adults as well as the healing of those young people.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is sometimes we're so focused on the brokenness and we're not balancing that out with, okay, now what does a healing space look like? What are the modalities of healing that we need to have in place for young people and for teachers? So instead of just investigating what's wrong, like creating what's right.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I'm not, most approaches, in our trauma-informed lens, focuses necessarily on the thing that broke. You're depressed, you're anxious, and while that's important, we can also balance that with more asset-driven approaches, right? That's what healing-centered ways of responding to brokenness or responding to harm is. It's a much more asset-driven, focused on young people's identity, culture, and so forth.
Later in the book, you say one way our lack of healing shows up is in the way we get so caught up in winning that we simply replace the oppressor. You say this was really something I highlighted and put stars all around it. You say the wrong first question is what do we need to do, and the right first question is who do we need to become. My question to you is, in a time when change and fierce advocacy seem so urgent to so many people in this election year, how do we get people to remember this wisdom?
Yeah, good question. And actually, it's the Reverend Ben McBride. That's his quote that I used in that book. So I don't want to take credit for that. Brilliant. I think we have to be able to do both, Todd. Like I think we got to learn to do both. We have to respond to the urgency of now with the advocacy because things are broken and people are hurting. And this is why I wrote the book, is because we're so binary. We have a binary default that we believe that the only way to do it is this way. But what I'm calling for is, if you are a leader that loves justice, that means you have to do more than what anyone else has done, right? you have to learn how to respond to the urgency of now because of what's happening. But you also have to create the space to do the deeper reflection about who you need to become.
Right.
And I think that without the reflection about who we are and who we need to become, once you get clear on that, then you begin to advocate for different things. Right now, if you read in the book, in the problem to possibility section, I talk about, one of the greatest casualties of oppression is not blocked opportunities. It's not, poverty. It's not racism. One of the greatest casualties of oppression is the destruction of our ability to dream beyond it. And as a result, we can't even see another way. So what we do, because we haven't been able to dream and imagine beyond this condition, is the most courageous thing we can do is end, dismantle, reduce the suffering, pain, the thing that's actually causing harm, right? So it's necessary, but it's insufficient for the kind of transformative change that I'm calling for in this book.
Right.
Hopefully that made some sense. I felt like I was
you did. One of the things I think is really tricky, I don't think social media is really good at, I think it actually reinforces, you talk in the book about belonging and othering in the end. I really think that it kind of reinforces us moving these polarities that we have, and seeing other people that if you don't align with my sort of dogmatic or orthodox view on something, then you're in that other group. And I feel like what that's done is taken some people who, we know that belonging and it, is a fundamental human need. They kind of move to a tribe where they feel like they now belong because they weren't accepted over here. And I think that's a mistake that sometimes we make, is when somebody doesn't align perfectly with what we view as orthodox and true, that we almost exile them, and then they go where they belong, and that has created, I think, has fueled some of this extremism that we're seeing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, hopefully I'm not chopping up. Am I okay? Camera okay?
Yeah, you're okay.
Well, we oftentimes call tribalism, what I call tribalism, is forms of belonging, which is, I belong, but what you're belonging to is actually a form of tribalism. And belonging means that if you are actually practicing belonging, it means that you have a conscious effort to see the humanity in someone else or another group that is not like your own. That's belonging. Belonging is hard. Tribalism is easy, right? In trainings that I do, I ask people to go through a process of imagining their own tribe, right? Whatever your tribe is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I ask folks to think about a group of people that are completely the opposite of what that tribe is. It could be racial group, it could be religious group, it could be geography, whatever that group is. And then imagine spending a week with them. That's hard, right? That's really hard. So, but if we're gonna talk about belonging, that's the work of belonging, right? It's actually trying to see through, and it's hard. And the reason it's hard, Todd, is because I believe that my goal in this work of belonging and justice is to try to see the humanity, even if you refuse to see mine. Now that's hard. Even if you refuse to see my humanity, I still have the responsibility to try to see yours. Now that's really hard work because of harm and all the things that creates.
Well, looks like might have lost Shawn.
Okay, am I frozen? Am I here?
You're back. Yeah. You may want to try logging off and logging back on, and I'll kill some time while you do that, because it did kind of like your voice and your video wasn't matched up exactly. So let's try it. Let's try that and see what happens.
Okay, I'm on a Ethernet link here, which I thought was going to be much more stable.
Okay,
but I could try my Wi-Fi again.
Try your
Hopefully.
Wi-Fi, and I'll bring you back on. I'll kill some time till you come back.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, that's no problem. While we're waiting on Shawn to log back on, I just want to remind everybody, if you haven't had a chance to check out our website, go to cool.us. That's our Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. You'll find all the live streams we do and all of the events that we have going on, including the resources we have for induction teachers that on those resources headed by Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder, who does a brilliant job with our cool coaching and other supports for induction teachers. So as we gear up for another school year, I know some of you don't want to hear that yet, but as we do, I hope you'll check out that website. And for those of you wanting to learn more about Shawn, just go to ShawnGinright.com. And I also just want to put this back up here. A lot of the stuff we're talking about rehumanizing school, there's a docuseries I created, 4-part docuseries called Rehumanizing School. You can find that on the Cool website. Go to cool.us/rehumanizing school. And Shawn's back, so we're going to bring him back on. There you are, Shawn.
Hopefully this Wi-Fi works, man.
Well, you're on your voice and your video don't exactly match, but we can hear you, and that's the main thing. So we're going to continue on. One of the things that I think is really hard about for me, like when I talk about like we need to love in the face of hate and we need to try to bring people in, I think sometimes, especially coming from a white male cisgender person, that can be perceived as well, you're not the one who's suffering oppression, so of course you can say it. It's easy for you to say that. How do we what are your thoughts on that? How do we promote that, what you're talking about, without sounding like we're trying to appease the people who might be doing harm? How do we thread those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, right, it's not one or the other, right? It's, am I there, Todd?
You're there.
Sometimes I was looking at your face, I'm like, oh, am I frozen again? I think we have to, and it's a slippery slope, man. Like I think the point that I'm trying to make is that oppression shapes and has an influence on those that are oppressed at the psycho-spiritual level. And we need to heal from that psycho-spiritual harm of oppression. And in the healing of it, we become something else. We're able to see a different world. And for white folks, I think in a similar way, it's not just an interrogation of your privilege. It's also an interrogation of how your privilege has harmed and reconciling that. And in that reconciliation, the struggle of that, as opposed to just an intellectual exercise of my privilege, and the exercise of grappling with that, how your privilege is harmed and all these sorts, I believe that you become something else, right? And so it's not just the words, Todd, around like, yeah, I'm privileged and, we need to love everybody. When people show up transformed, it is not what you say, it is your vibration. Like, I can get it, right? A decision and a process and an engagement and a grappling with that is a tough journey, but on the outside, the outcome of that is a transformed person. I don't know if any of that makes any sense, man.
It does make total sense. And I think what, you talk about how a lot of people just want to avoid doing this inner work. And I think it has to do with, changing is hard, depending on who your parents were, where you grew up. The idea of really reflecting and allowing that ego to drop and saying, maybe there's something I need to learn here. And so I see this in South Carolina in particular, with this pushback against DEI and this whole thing that they had, they brought up critical race theory, almost, and now almost like this idea that we don't want to really explore, quote unquote, divisive historical events or issues, because we just want to move forward and be together. And in a way that sounds nice, but it also is like to me a very disingenuous way of approaching things, almost like you just want to dismiss what's happened, even though what's happened historically shows up in the systems and structures and mindsets of people now. But we just want to just like erase that and say, Obama was president, everything's equal, we're good. I get frustrated with that. But then I think about all the work that I have left to do, all the biases I'm still working through. I'm trying to be patient with that, but it's really hard when you have leaders who are actively trying to squash even those kind of discussions and those opportunities for people to do self-reflection.
Yeah, and it's more harm, right? It's more harm and it's harm for both white folk and for young folks who are in systems that are oppressive. When you you outlaw books that are around quote unquote critical race theory or anything that talks about race, it's another form of systemic harm. Why is it harm? It's harm because it creates more suffering for those who are oppressed, and it creates harm for those who are oppressing because you're not actually becoming more fully human, grappling with the condition, right? And so, and part of it is fear, is operating out of a sense of fear. This work is uncomfortable. Talking about race, let me just give you a really quick example that happened to me in one of my courses just this last year. A student made a comment to me about this book we were reading, and the student got triggered and said that wrote me a note like, "Hey, this class is creating harm to me, right? It's creating the environment of harm." And I took that really seriously, and I got upset. Like, I had to check myself. I'm like, I got upset. So as a professor, I could do a lot of things because I have power. But what I chose to do was do the hard thing, which is to talk to this student, which is to like sit with this student and listen to this student's story. And in that process, I disagreed with what the student said, but we actually came out of that with something different had I just responded in a way that was about using my power. So the point that I'm trying to make is that when we engage in conversations and reveal the sort of racist policies, the racist history, the homophobic ways in which our society has been built, when we do that and we engage it, we actually are creating greater space for healing, greater space for reconciliation, greater space. And we have so little of that. The more, and here's this, Todd, that my concern is that, our democracy is so frail and fragile, and it's like a yarn and a piece of fabric that's we're watching it unravel. As we speak, we're watching it unravel. Where are the spaces where they may exist? I just want to know where they are, where we're trying not to unravel them, right? Where are we having the spaces where a Black cisgender man can sit with a gay and lesbian community in North Carolina or in the Appalachian Mountains, or a poor white family that you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm making sense here, but where are the spaces where we're actually trying to see across difference and have conversations across difference, and actually to see if we can actually do that? I don't know where those spaces are, but schools hold that possibility.
Yeah. And I feel like what's happening with schools is they're just saying, let's just avoid the controversy and not have the conversations at all. Let's not bring that up in the classroom. Let's just stick to the curriculum. And in terms of society in general, what I see is, it used to be, I noticed there were a lot of conservatives when I logged onto Facebook. There were a lot of conservatives, and we would have these kind of discussions. And then it kind of, I don't know when, 2019, 2020, it broke down. I don't know if they went to Truth Social, and now you have people going to Rumble and other people on YouTube. And there's like these dividing, and Twitter's kind of become a more conservative space, or X. And so I feel, but even when I go on to X, I'm seeing this tribalism play out where I noticed myself after 2 or 3 minutes on X, I come away more angry.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there are healing conversations, and it feels like everybody just wants to avoid the conflict and just immediately frame the other side by its worst elements, or by
Yeah.
its least wise elements, instead of steel manning what other people might have to say. Let's consider that. Let's have this conversation. It feels like we're not really listening to each other at all anymore.
Yeah, and it's hard. That's really challenging to have transformative conversations via these mediums, X and Rumble and, Facebook, right? Is it possible? Yes. But is it likely to have a transformative conversation? No. What I'm talking about is the space where we could sit with one another,
Right.
where I could hear your story, Todd, where you could talk about your mama or your daddy, right? Or you could talk about how you grew up, or your favorite food, or what your grandmama used to cook you, or why you used to get your butt whooped when you used to cook, whatever it is, right? Your story, when I can sit with you and see past what's in front of me and hear that journey that brought you to this, I see you different. Don't mean I agree with your politics.
Right.
So in the book, you probably read the chapter where I sat with the white nationalist. Was the hardest chapter by far to write, to hear
Mhm.
to hear John talk about his self-proclaimed white nationalist ideology and ideas. Um, it was hard, but I was challenged to do that because my wife said you should do it. I don't do everything she said I should do though. But it was enlightening, right? It was like, oh, I could actually sit and listen, and I could disagree, and we could disagree with one another. And it didn't change me, my politics, neither did it change his.
Yeah.
But there was a moment where he began to talk about um, how he felt when his child was born with her heart on the outside. Her heart, she was born with a birth defect.
Hmm.
He almost was in tears, man. Because I remember, I know what that feels like to have your child not well, right?
Right.
There's a moment where he was almost breaking down in that interview. I'm like, damn, bro, like I feel you. Like that's go that what he did, that was beyond the politics, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm not trying to promote a kumbaya, like let's just
Right.
all get along, hold hands and sing, I'm not trying to do that. And I'm not trying to promote that that's the solution. But what I am convinced is that the spaces for us to be able to do that are very rare, man. And if we can create those spaces, that's the only thing that I believe that's actually going to strengthen and reweave this democracy.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think it's about, when I've tried to have those kind of conversations, it's really interesting. I've had, conservative folks on Facebook, and, come out and attack me and attack the organization I work with. And I try to reach out to them and just have a conversation, and they immediately want to get into the issues that where we're divided. And I said, can we just start with, do you like Star Wars? What do you like football? What can we find some shared humanity here, so we have some anchor points that we can pull
Yeah.
on when we get to those difficult conversations. We can have a resource to draw upon that shows that we're not completely different. We're not like, I'm not from another planet. We just have different ideas. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, I really feel like what we've done is we tie tightly the idea to the person, and then we judge the person, rather than taking the idea and saying, let me judge the idea, but let me drop some of the judgment of the person and be more curious, which it sounds like you were, just have this curiosity about who this person is. Ideas are bad. Let me attack those ideas. I'm not going to accept those ideas. I'm going to work as hard as I can against those ideas. But if I negate your humanity, I think, like you said in the book, then we're adopting the sort of mindset of oppressors by
Yeah.
by dehumanizing. And what we don't want to do is, even if we were able to wave a magic wand and win all of these arguments, if we dehumanize people in the process, what are we actually winning?
Exactly. We're not actually recreating. We're actually just reproducing the sort of architecture, right? We're just redecorating the room, right? That's what we're doing. We're redecorating the room because, you know, dehumanization is written into the ways in which some of these structures are. And so winning policy wins. And so again, I don't want to suggest that we should not be fighting for better policy and so forth.
Right.
But again, that's only half the equation. That's only half of it. And so we have to be very mindful. And that's the hard work that I'm calling for, is like, how do we actually sit with and try to understand one's humanity in the face of dehumanization? That's hard, man.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know any other way, right? If we don't do that, the consequences of that are what we see in some countries, right? Where we can, you know, enslave, or here, where we can enslave Africans, we can dehumanize Native Americans, we can dehumanize Chinese Americans, right? We can easily convince ourselves that they are not worthy of my compassion. They are not worthy of anything because the idea is connected to them as people, as human. They're connected, right? And I can't separate those two.
Right.
That's a skill, Todd, that we haven't yet, we haven't yet been able to learn or navigate. And I think that that's something that we have to really sit with and try to figure out, which is what I hope people get from this book.
That's what I got.
And it's hard work, right? It's not like, oh, yeah, let's just, it's hard as hell, right? And I'm saying exactly as hard as hell. This is why, it's hard as hell, because it's worthy. And without it, without being able to do that, the evidence is pretty clear about what will happen to a society or people when we adopt and we become comfortable with dehumanization.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you start, the violence is, excused. To eliminate the people that you're dehumanizing.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this in the movements for Black Lives, right? Where people go, oh, the police dehumanize Black young boys and men all the time. We didn't know that. But it's because it's become so normalized, right? Where it becomes so easy. I just want to call attention to the hard work, not of both police officers to humanize Black boys, as well as our communities work to humanize and to hold accountable, which are both important, to hold accountable police officers, but also to humanize. And so we have to think about new ways to create systems of that can see each other very differently. And I hope the book, I really hope the book pushes people to think and wrestle with and struggle with and grapple with these ideas, because I'm doing it, right? I wish I had this book, when I was in my 30s, right? Because I think I would have at least come to some of these questions a long time ago, right? I become really frustrated with the normalizing of the way in which we move towards justice.
Yes.
And the normalizing of burnout, the normalizing of depression, the normalizing of adopting the toxicity. Did I freeze again?
It's perfect.
It becomes normalized, right? And then the hatred that was fed to us, digest,
right,
and then bring that into our movements. And so I hope the book at least calls attention to that process, so that we can begin to sort of heal from it and figure out a new way forward.
Yeah, this is the thing that I really my big takeaway from the book is I've been so focused on trying to fix the system and all the symptoms of a sick system. I've been trying to fix working conditions for teachers, battle back against these book bans, battle against different types of oppressions, advocate for LGBTQ teachers. And I think we need to continue to do that. but I didn't even look at like what I was becoming in the process of doing that. And I noticed when I read your book, I'm like, I'm really filled with a lot of rage and anger. And I think there's nothing wrong with being angry, but when you become consumed by it, where am I headed? In continuing to look externally and failing to look at what's going on inside me. I think there's a lot of danger there when we just blindly focus, when we're so rigid in looking outside ourselves. And one of the ways you talked about this was sort of this old world versus new world way of looking at systemic change. And some of the old world ways of building power, building collective power. This is what I've seen in our movement. We're trying to build collective power, whether it's through money and people, and trying to coalesce the resources to leverage that power to make change. But in the process, even the people who, like even the organizations that are supposed to be doing this work and sort of advancing it, you see structurally within them a lot of times the leaders who clearly have not been doing any inner work, and then end up guiding things in ways that aren't skillful or wise.
Yeah, and so yes, and the folks within those organizations sometimes aren't able to give grace to mistakes of leaders, right? So the environment is an environment of non-gracefulness, right? It is only I talk about dancing between accountability and grace, right? That when we can dance, flawlessly between accountability and grace, that's when we're able to give grace and hold people accountable in ways that allows us to be human. So the old sort of model, the old world around power building and external focus is important. We need that. And without an attention to the inner transformation, this is Grace Lee Boggs, right? The inner change defines what I'm trying to fight for in the outside.
Mm.
If I'm fighting on the outside without inner work, then I can actually become the thing that I can become the very thing that I want to transform.
Yeah.
And so it is really paying attention to that relationship between what we need to do on the inside. I can give you so many examples, but I know we're pressed for time, but I don't care. I'm gonna tell you this 30-second example. Here, California, organizing groups for years and years and years are fighting to close. We have youth prisons here in California where young people are sent to camps. Costs billions of dollars for years. A lot of organizing groups were like, let's close these prisons for young people. Young people don't need to be in prisons. They need to be in other kind of facilities, Governor signed it. This is a couple of years ago and actually won, right? Like they successfully closed the youth prisons. Now this is billions of dollars. Some of those organizing groups found themselves going, what do we do now? What do we do now? We actually won, but we haven't reimagined what we want. We haven't actually dreamed of new systems because we're so busy fighting and ending and disrupting and trying to eliminate the systems that we have. We haven't had time to dream about the systems that we want.
Right. Yeah, we work on deconstructing, but so then even when we're successful, so then what are we constructing in its place? I see that happen all the time. I see that in education advocacy, like, let's get rid of this policy. Okay, we're getting rid of it. What are we building though? What are we building? We can't just be in education advocacy in the business of getting rid of bad policy. I mean, that is part, to your point, and yes, we need to fight against bad policy, but if we're not building something in its place, I just think it lacks. I don't think it inspires people, and I think that's one of the things that happens in these movements is you're just critical, and trying to tear down something which it makes sense. But if you're not building something in its place that inspires people, that's why when I created that documentary, I was like, I'm a critic of this, test and punish paradigm that we see in public schools. But I can talk about that all day and rail against it. But okay, so what's the alternative? And
Yeah.
trying to show an example of the alternative, because if you don't do that, it starts to fall on deaf ears. People just stop listening to you when you're just critical of something without offering, okay, what's the solution? What are we building?
Yeah, that's right. Right. That's right. And that's sort of the new world. How do we imagine something differently? How do we figure out ways to take care of one another? How do we build community in the process? How do we restore our sense of humanity and purpose? Right. These are different kinds of questions that makes our work for justice more sustainable, more fruitful, more grounded. Groups, new groups that are advocating, saying new groups that are trying to, new groups that are using sort of new world are using these as the basis for their organizing, right?
Yeah.
Seeing and centering humanity, seeing and centering grace and accountability, right? Being able to be aware of that and how it shows up in organizations and movement work.
I really love that, the dance between grace and accountability. And I feel like I dance between that within myself as well. Like how do I hold myself accountable, but also give myself grace and find that balance? Because I notice myself, I tend to go into states where I'm just really hard on myself and pushing and self-critical. And then I notice giving myself grace. And then how do I find that, real balance between those two internally? Because that, one of the things I've noticed is how I treat myself tends to be how I then treat others. So if I can't find that grace and
Yeah.
accountability within myself, then I'm probably not going to be good at dancing with that with other people.
People. And we're really good, Todd. We're really good at accountability, but we suck at grace,
Yeah.
right? With ourselves and with other people. It's good. Yeah. Accountability, we're good at making sure we're accountable and others are accountable.
Mhm.
But that over accountability without grace it's just adopting the same sort of framework of oppression that we're trying to fight against. And it's not easy, right? It's a dance. It's why I call it a dance, because you got to learn how to dance. You got to learn when to go from grace. You got to learn when to shift to accountability. You have to learn how to do both. It's the and learning how to dance with it. And when we dance, the dance is, it's a back and forth, right? You have to learn the rhythm of it and what feels right. And you have to trust yourself, right? About grace and accountability. I learned that with my own kids, right? And they're the great lesson when you have children, but you have to, they're children, so they got to give them room to make mistakes, but you also have to hold them accountable, right? And so I try to practice that with myself, even in my own household. With my kids are grown now, so I don't do much of that anymore. But in the work that I do in my organization, I try to practice that grace and accountability with the folks that work for Flourish Agenda, and it's not easy.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about too is how, I think the capitalist culture, and I want to come across as, Marxist, but in this capitalist culture, I think it facilitates this sort of frenzy that we are all in, and this sort of grind culture that we glorify. And I think that time to heal is sort of the prerequisite to heal. So a lot of people want to heal, but don't feel they have the time. And I think it's connected directly to this idea of just being in a constant frenzy. And part of that is the system, what it does to us. But part of that also, I do think some of us get so busy because it's a way to avoid doing that hard inner work. Can you talk a little bit about that, and also about what you recommend people, what are some practices people can do to heal?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, the systems that we work in, and even in school systems, are saturated with frenzy. I mean, completely saturated with frenzy and frenzy culture. And that comes from, capitalist culture that values a human being, but what a human being can produce or earn. And so as a result of that, we've digested it and we've become comfortable with kind of frenzy culture, which is I got much to do. I got so much on my plate. I got my to-do list. I got my things, we all kind of we actually get some sense of validation of significance, that I matter. The more that I do and I accomplish, I matter more, right?
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
And so that comes from capitalist culture, that how we value human beings. So we have to learn how to disrupt that, about learning when to say, you know what, thank you for the invitation to join this committee, but I don't want to do that, or I can't do that, or I choose not to do that. Saying yes to yourself. What they say, saying no to someone else is saying yes to yourself. And that to recognize, I've talked to so many people that the greatest thing in that chapter is recognizing when I'm in frenzy. Like, a lot of people don't even recognize it. It's just like regular. It's just like a fish in water.
Default state. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, this is it. And then, one week a year I go on vacation and I could sit around and respond to emails. Right. So it's become so prevalent in our society that we don't recognize it. So how do you actually break away from it? The first thing is recognize when you're in it, right? That's the first thing. Like, do I have time for myself? Do I believe that I don't have time? When you're in frenzy when you say, I don't have time. I literally have no time. Right. Now you are in frenzy. So I don't have time to do that. Now you're in frenzy, because you always have time. And I can go much further into this, but I don't have time to do it. See, I'm in frenzy. So one, recognize when you're in frenzy. Two, if you could just take the time at the end of the day to write down an inventory of all the things that fed you and all the things that drained you. What happened? Like, just take an inventory of that, right? And do that for a week. And then you begin to see your life sort of like, is most of your stuff draining? I had to go grocery shopping. I had this conversation with my husband. I had to, go to school and deal with the parents, whatever it is, right? So the inventory raises your consciousness and awareness about how you're spending your time. And once you're able to see it, then you can make choices, right? And I call them, become a diet, a flow diet, I call it a diet because a diet is something you do small over time. Maybe it's 5 minutes a day. Just for 5 minutes, do something that brings you joy and peace. If it's a walk, if it's lighting a candle, if it's not responding to emails, right? Here's one practice. Take your cell phone and put your cell phone in another room for an hour, just an hour. Take your cell phone and put it in another room for an hour. It feels weird because our cell phones were so connected to, that would feel weird to intentionally put my cell phone somewhere for an hour because I might miss something. But it's just a consciousness of slowing down. Does that make sense? We're trying to create the barriers for frenzy. We're trying to put barriers in for frenzy, right? We're trying to disrupt ourselves from it. So those are a couple of practices: is an inventory of what fed you and an inventory of what drained you. Just do that at the end of a day. And when you get to the end of the week, take a look at what you wrote. That brings awareness of how you're spending your time. Little things like putting your cell phone elsewhere intentionally to slow down, or little things that we could do that helps you with your diet for flow.
Right. Yeah. I think those are all great suggestions. And one of the things when we work with teachers is the first thing is just to build an awareness, start to be aware of your choices, aware of your thoughts, and just building an awareness, because I do think we tend to all be on autopilot a lot. And we're not living with intention. We're just kind of going through the motions of our lives because we're in such a frenzied state all the time. So I think your suggestion to start building awareness about when you're in that state, and what are some things maybe you can let go of or say no to, start setting boundaries. And then, we have been training teachers on mindfulness practice and other healing ways of being, whether that's yoga or mindful walking. There's a lot of different things educators or humans can do just help cultivate that awareness and kind of deconstruct that frenzied state that we all seem to be in.
Absolutely.
We're kind of running out of time here. I did have one quick last question. I saw that you wrote a book about the promise of hip hop culture, and we're kind of close to the same age, I think. What were some of your favorite hip hop artists from back in the day?
Oh man, well, I love Lauryn Hill, the Fugees. I was just listening to oh man, one of my favorite artists is oh my God, why am I going blank? Why am I going blank? Or just listen to it. Let me bring out my list, my Spotify. Diggable Planets.
Diggable Planets. Yeah.
Who like that? Diggable Planets. Yeah,
Yeah.
Diggable Planets.
Yeah.
Who like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. So I was a DJ back in college, and we had a hip hop show, and that was when De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Public Enemy,
Oh, De La Soul, yeah.
all those.
Yeah. Questlove.
Yeah, I feel like that was such a golden era from about 89 to about 92. Feels like it was. That's when Diggable Planets came out, probably 91, with that album. The second album's great too. Anyway, I just wanted to connect with you on that and end on a different kind of note, just to get to know you a little bit better. But thank you so much for the books. Especially, I just want to hold this up for everybody. Go find this book, The Four Pivots, by Dr. Shawn Ginwright. It's an really excellent book. I think particularly for those of us in this advocacy work, in this social justice work, it's such a powerful book that we need to read, so that our movements aren't built with wounded warriors, as you put it. And I think that's what's happening, is so many of us are wounded by the work that we're doing, trying to fix and help, and with positive intentions, but allowing the healing that we need inside ourselves to go undone. And so I just want to thank you for that, for the book, and for your work.
Thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate it.
All right. That was Dr. Shawn Ginwright. Again, you can find out more about Dr. Ginwright's work on his website, ShawnGinright.com. He also has a website called flourishagenda.com. So just type in flourishagenda.com. You can read about that nonprofit that he runs as well. I want to thank him so much for his time. A couple of things coming up that I do want to promote. This Friday at Columbia College, we are going to have our Educator Health and Wellness Day. So it kind of ties into what we were talking about tonight. We're going to have a day of yoga and mindfulness and nutritional wellness specifically for educators. We have a great keynote speaker named Jaleesa White, and you can register still. I think we still have it open at circleofrest.org. Veronica Primus, who's a member of the SCEA, is organizing this event along with Columbia College, and we look forward to working with her and seeing some of you there. Also want to mention the work being done by Alex Del Castillo. He's been doing a series of weekly yoga sessions that are free online. You can find those on the CEWL website at CEWL.us/yoga, and they're also on the homepage. These are like 15-minute introductory yoga sessions that he's doing, and they're really great. And I think you'll really, if those of you wanting to experiment or try out yoga, it's a good way to do that at no cost to you. And speaking of no cost, we are currently still in early enrollment. And what that means is you can join the SCEA if you're interested at jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744, and you will not pay any dues until September. So you can join us, and no dues for the rest of July or for August, and you won't start paying dues until September. It's a great time for you to join if you've been thinking about joining. And if you're not ready to join yet, but you'd like to connect with us, you can go to the SCEA.org. You can look at the bottom of the screen or right there, the SCEA.org/YRO, and fill out the form there, and we will follow up with you and get to know you, and you can ask questions about who we are and what we stand for. You'll probably see a lot of us around at new employee orientations in districts across South Carolina over the coming weeks. Looking forward to meeting some of our new teachers across the state. And as always, I do want to remind you that this live stream and all the live streams and events that we do are housed at CEWL.us. That website's right there, CEWL.us. You can also find our cool content creators create all kinds of content. So we have a series called Cool Books by Cassie Owens Moore about banned books. We have Steve Newsom, who does Cool Views, which is a blog post, really great writing that Steve's doing. We encourage you to do that and share those resources. Pete Stone's Cool Vibes videos, if you haven't seen those, he's done several videos throughout June. Really, really powerful, thought-provoking work, and a whole host of other cool content creators that we house those videos and resources and written pieces on the Cool website, and we encourage you to explore those, to share those with educators in your area and throughout your social networks. We'd really appreciate you sharing those. And then also the Cool Induction Institute, which is our induction work that we do through Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder's department. She has been wonderful. She's came on board about a year ago and has already revolutionized the work that we're doing with induction teachers. And I'm sure they'll be starting up Cool Coaching again, which is free one-to-one online coaching for induction teachers. Her and her team will be starting that up again, I'm sure, pretty soon as the school year starts. So lots of great free resources for educators here in South Carolina. We hope that you'll explore those. All the stuff that we do for wellness, all the stuff that we do for learning, all the stuff that we do for supporting educators across South Carolina. We love you. We care about you. We want to make sure you have the resources you need to be successful, the tools that you need to be well, the information you need to be well and to be successful. We need educators. We need great educators, and the SCEA is the movement for educators to join, and not just classroom teachers, but we are welcoming folks into our movement who are cafeteria staff, bus drivers, custodial staff, front office workers, admins. Anybody who works in a public school can join the SCEA and enjoy the benefits of membership and enjoy being a part of a movement that's trying to create the kind of schools that we deserve. And one of the ways we do that is what Shawn Ginright has suggested we do, and that is starting within, starting with ourselves, healing ourselves, so that we can create healing-centered spaces for educators and students. And it starts with us. It starts inside. If we start outside, we're missing a fundamental piece of what a movement needs to be, and that is a movement built with folks who have investigated what's going on inside them, have worked on healing those things inside them that need to be healed, so that we can create healed communities. Communities where people belong. And in a country that's becoming more divisive, and in a country that unfortunately is becoming more violent, it's absolutely a matter of urgency for us to start healing inside and create healing outside of ourselves through collectively healing as well. Thanks so much for Dr. Shawn Ginright for his time tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you on the next live stream. We have something set up for next Tuesday. I'm not sure if it's going to happen yet, but we're hoping we're going to have a live stream next Tuesday night. We'll keep you posted. Until then, have a wonderful week, and thanks again to Dr. Ginright.
Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school.